All right, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, beloved. My name is Ashley Whiteside. I am the founder, curator, and clinician of Altruistic Ash, a multidimensional wellness service. Today's workshop is Winter is Coming. Yes, I'm seeing some head nods. I'm seeing some like, who. If you live above the Mason-Dixon line, you were probably feeling it already. And, the skies just opened up and downpoured here in Philadelphia. So I could only imagine how things are going elsewhere in the world, but it's real and it's really happening. So today's workshop is really on how to build a personal mental health toolkit. A lot of what today's session is going to be is me providing prompts and then you all having some time to really process these things for yourself. So if you don't already have a notebook or some paper or an iPad or your phone notes, just somewhere that you can take a couple of notes and get the prompts. Again, everyone who is present and who signed up for the workshop will get access to the recording. And yeah, let's just hop right on in. So some gentle reminders to get started. Also, if you see me looking over here, it's just because I have my notes on this computer screen and you all are recording here. So just a heads up, so information provides safety. But some gentle reminders. First and foremost, always do what you need to do to take care of yourself first. Reminder that, again, we will have the recording. It is not urgent. It is not the end of the world if you need to step away. So please make sure that you are doing what you need to do in that regard. Okay, you're gonna do that.
Recording in progress.
Got it. Sorry, my computer. Got my notes over here now. Just all right. I have to mute one of these because I can't talk on both.
We can't hear you. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me now? All right. And then I'm just going to mute this other computer. I just don't want there to be an additional feedback. Thank you for bearing with me. Give me 1 second, y'all. I'm just gonna X that because that's not working for us. That's fine. So some gentle reminders, please do what you need to do to take care of yourself. Feel free to engage in whatever way feels good and comfortable for you. That can look like commenting in the chat. That can look like providing additional feedback in that way in regard. Type any questions that you have in the chat box. I will do my best to tend to those as they come up. All right. This is a donation-based workshop. What that means is it is free. This information is going to be accessible to the internet, but if you pay what you can, if you can, the suggested donation is $15 to $25, and the donation is available on Cash App, Venmo, or on Zelle. I also have a link directly in my link tree if you just want to pay with a credit or debit card there. All right, so getting into today's flow. Today, we have about 5 key things that we're going to go through. We're going to talk about the importance of a plan, right? For the next 60 minutes, we're going to talk about why do we need to have a plan for our mental health? Why is that important? Why is it something that is valuable to us? We're going to talk about some stressors and what those stressors are. We're also going to talk about those warning signs and when things start to break down, what can we do? We'll talk about crisis planning and when things are bad, how can we start to craft and create spaces so we can support ourselves? And then from there, we'll talk about recovery and reminders. So what do we do to clean up? And what are some of the things that are important that we inherently remember? Can I get some thumbs up? Does that sound like a good plan? All right, let's hit it. First, Y'all should probably know some stuff about me. Hi. Hi there. My name is Ashley. I use they, she, and beloved pronouns. I'm from altruisticash.co. I co-create healing spaces for Black and Brown folks to heal in community. What's really important about that is that a lot of the hurts that we have happen in relationship, and we think that healing happens in isolation, when healing also happens in community and in relationship. I am fueled by my current personal charge to help Black femmes achieve embodied authenticity by providing a safe space to transform pain and hurt into power and healing. I do that by offering therapy and counseling. I have some group programs that I'll be launching very soon, which I'm excited about, and community educational events as these. That's me. Oh, my little daffodil self. All right. So first thing first, a wellness toolkit. What comes to mind? What do you have in terms of a toolkit or a plan? What emotions come to mind when you think about planning or just going through the process of thinking of a plan for that? You can feel free to drop those in the chat, or you can unmute yourself and share.
Can I go?
Sure.
Hi, everyone. My name is Linda. Um, Honestly, when I think of toolkit and plan, it's just like different routines or different parts of a plan that I may have that I will implement in this season. But I think so this session would be useful for me because then I can like, oh, look at something and say, oh, this is my plan for the winter and for the fall. But yeah, right now everything is sporadic and everything is like all over the place. I just want to, be settled and grounded in that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. Does that resonate with anyone else who's here today? Kind of like, I'll make a plan for this, or I'll make a plan for here. I don't necessarily have something that's consistent that I'm using and refining over a period of time.
I guess I'll share almost the reverse of that. I get frustrated because let's say I found a tool that helped me last time and then I'm in a situation and I'm trying to use that tool and it's not working and I'm like, WTF, like I'm trying to use the tools that I learned, but it's not helping me in this situation. And then it's like, you got to go get more tools.
Mm-hmm. I call it different strokes for different folks, and there are different tools for different things that are going on, right? What do they say? Yeah, the same way that yesterday's price is not today's price. Yesterday's tool is not today's tool, in the same way and fashion in that regard. Sometimes it just don't be hitting how it needs to be hitting. I see that someone dropped something in the chat. Plans me feel prepared, but also worried. I don't want to be too tied down. I definitely understand that. And feeling that concern in that regard as well, and feeling like I want to have something, so at least I know I have the tools available, but also at the same time being like, where is the flexibility, or where is the ability to move within that? And we're going to talk a little bit more about that today as well, Corinne. Thank y'all for sharing. So keeping it really, really simple, right? A wellness toolkit is an organized type of documentation of various tools and activities that you can use to support your well-being. Want to keep it really, really simple. It is not, I feel like sometimes people can make things real fluffy. It's just an organization of the things that work well for you. And that could be something that's formally documented down. I find that that's really helpful, especially when you're in spaces of distress and it's kind of hard to recall. But it could just be things that oh, this works really well for me, so I'm going to do this. Okay. So a wellness toolkit, let's start here. I'm going to put a timer on here for 2 minutes. And I want you to think about a time when you were feeling well, when things were going good. Recall how that actually felt in your body. That could be from last week, last month, last year, last millennium. but recall in your body what it felt like the last time that you were feeling well. What were some of the things that you were doing or were not doing when you were feeling well that contributed to that feeling of wellness? For the next 2 minutes in your on your paper or your journal and with your writing utensil, list out as many things as you can think of without judgment. It doesn't have to be organized or full sentences even, but just list out as many of those things that were going on for you when you were feeling well. So I'm going to start a 2-minute timer and we are going to get it popping. Got about 15 seconds left here. Okay. All right. So what were some of those things that came up for you? If anyone would like to share. Or what did it even feel like to kind of go through that process and think back to that time?
I'll share for me. I wrote, I feel well when my thoughts are quiet. And like just thinking of like what it feels like in my body, I don't have chest pain or this speed that I've constantly feel. So those are the moments where I'm like, okay, I feel okay in my body.
Nice. Thank you. Okay. So the importance of having a plan. So plans are a way for the current version of you to proactively take care of future version of you. It creates space to identify and practice the skills before needing them in a space of distress or crisis. Practice makes practice. And I really firmly believe that practicing things before you're in a space of distress allows you to call on your tools and actually use them to the best ability of their effectiveness before you're actually in crisis. Sometimes when you practice things and you're already in a state of being activated, it's hard for you to really tap into the beneficial aspects of it because you're already at a point where you're activated beyond your baseline and you're not really sure how close it's supposed to get you back to your baseline. All of this information is data. And what's really, really important is looking at life as gathering more information about yourself so you can live out your life more effectively and aligned with how you want to. So how can we organize the data and the information that we've gathered into ways that make sense? So I usually like to look at it in 4 different types of ways of organizing. So you have your daily rhythms and routines. What are those AM and PM routines look like? What are those things that you need to do every single day to keep yourself well? Every single day to keep yourself well. What does that look like for you? Then we talk about regular maintenance. So these are the things that need to happen on a weekly, monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly, annual basis. What are those things that you must do that contribute to your wellness? And again, these are things that only you can decide and choose for yourself. No one can tell you that that's unreasonable or that doesn't really help you, because it really depends for you what those things are. Then I like to talk about what are our bad day bare minimums. Ideally, we have our daily rhythms and routines. What are those things that in theory we would love to do every single day? But when we have those days where like, it just ain't it just ain't hitting, the light is not there. What are the things that we need to do at a bare minimum, at least to get ourselves from where we are closer to baseline? Because sometimes getting back to baseline in a day isn't always necessarily reasonable. That's just the truth, and that's just the fact of the matter. But what are the things that we can do to help maintain a steady state so we can get closer to that? And then another way to organize our data is going through like the different life domains and having a couple of things in each of those different domains that can support our wellness and well-being. All right, so let's talk about a sample daily routine. This is a part of what is my daily routine. I'm just gonna move my face over to this side. So 7 a.m. is like my wake up time, right? So that's my wake up time. Usually first thing in the morning, I really like to move my body, stretch, yoga, work out, do something first thing in the morning to kind of activate my body. I really like to try and drink at least a glass of water when I wake up to kind of get things started. I like my water with lemon and a little bit of agave because I like it sweet. Yes, I pretty much drink lemonade first thing in the morning. And as Tab would say, that's my business. Okay. And then I really try to make my bed. Really being able to accomplish that first thing in the morning helps me start off, okay, like I've gotten this thing done. I've gotten out of bed. I made my bed this morning. Like I've already can check that thing off to help me feel like I've accomplished something. Ideally, again, I would love to do all of those things in the first hour of my day. Does it always happen? No, I'm not even gonna lie. Then we have like my morning routine that includes more exercise if I didn't already do it, eating breakfast and commuting to work. My commute to work really right now looks like coming down to my home office, which is great. Commute to work may also mean like going to a co-working space or going to a coffee shop so I can do my morning block of work. I try every day to take lunch at 12:30 and at least for 30 to 60 minutes, do nothing that's work related. If I have been sitting at my desk or if I have been sitting sedentary in one place since I started my workday, I try and get up and leave or move from that desk. I move my body. I love to walk. It's getting colder, so walking is going to be a little bit harder. But even if that means just like putting on some really good music and dancing, the goal is to move my body and eat. I have a really, really hard time with remembering to eat. And as we get into early warning signs, that is usually one of the first things that goes once I start to get a little stressed. My evening routine, 6 p.m. is my decompress time. That's when I check in with my friends. That's when I check in with my partner, checking in with people or, calling my mom or things of that nature. So that's really kind of what helps me decompress, is having that connection, cooking dinner, making sure I have another meal for the day. You see a theme going here. Ideally, this is my social media and Netflix time. Does it happen throughout the day? Yes, but this is like my designated spot for it, usually throughout the day. I usually start to wind down for bedtime around 9 p.m. Again, like gentle movement, showering, doing my face routine, which is like washing my face, toner, the nighttime stuff, is really a great way for me to have signal to my body, like, okay, this is what we're doing to get ready for bed. And then at 10:30, it's like sleep time. So I really try hard to not be on my phone after 9:30. Again, does that always happen? Absolutely not. I'm not even gonna lie to you, not even gonna pretend. But I try to have less screen time after 9:30. So that's my time for like journaling or reading or just sipping on a cup of tea while, looking at the moon or having a conversation with somebody that I care about and I love. So my question for you guys is, do you have any routines or anything that you are doing daily that you already kind of have a habit of, even if it's not something formal that you have like organized? Is there something that you're like, oh yeah, like when I wake up, this is just kind of like the flow that I generally take throughout the day. And that works well for me. Yeah, I got some head nods. Okay, okay, okay.
For me, where was the share?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. For me, I mean, it's not really like a whole thing, but when I get home, like every day or the days that I commute, I like wash my face. Not like wash it, but I like put water on my face as soon as I get home because I need like a physical, like cold water, day's over, did everything I could possibly do. Can't be thinking about did I send that email or crap, did I send that one thing? It's done. And that I don't know, that like does something for me when I come home. So
Yeah, that's a really important ritual and routine, and especially for a lot of folks that work from home. One of the biggest things that came out of the pandemic is a lot of folks are having a lot more trouble disconnecting because they work from home and they home at home. Their work-life balance becomes thrown off or skewed. So really trying to figure out what are those things, especially if you are a person that doesn't necessarily have to commute to work every day or doesn't commute to the office at all. What are some of those things that you can do to help your body signify, okay, work is done, and now we transition into that time. So one of the things that I used to do when I was working from home is when I would get home for the day, or when I would literally close my laptop for the day. I would leave my house and I would take a walk around my block. And that was something that helped signify to my brain. And then usually I listen to some music or I listen to a podcast, which are things that I would normally do on my commute. And when I would come back in the house, I was like, okay, like I would take off my shoes, I'd take off my jacket, which would help signal to my body, like, okay, we're coming home for home now. Corinne said, I pull a tarot or oracle card daily in the morning, typically after I shower. After I shower or before I get ready to eat breakfast or work. I love that. So being able to get an energy read for the day and be like, y'all, what's up? Especially because the Pams been moving a lot lately. They moving a lot lately. And so really trying to get a read on like what's going on for the day, or what is the energy that I need to be aware of or focus on or hone in or embody for that day. I love that. All right. So here we have our organizing using our life domains, which I really think is a cool way of looking at this. So over here on the left, we have the self-care wheel by Olga Phoenix. I feel like everyone has seen the self-care wheel at some point in time. And this breaks it down into 6 different dimensions. So the physical, the psychological, the emotional, the spiritual, the personal, and the professional. So these have a lot of different activities or things that you can do to take care of yourself within this wheel. And I like to use this wheel as an example because sometimes people have a really hard time of identifying, well, what does psychological self-care actually look like? What are those things that I could do to take care of that part of my own personal well-being? And then on the right, I have the 8 dimensions of wellness, which is essentially similar, but a different framework or an expanded version where we talk about money and finance, career and growth, health and fitness, fun and recreation, family and friends, personal development, partners in love or relationships in general, and then spirituality. What are those things that we can do to pour into those each of those spaces for ourselves? And so I'm going to give you another 2 minutes here. You can pick either or if you can want to just read through on the life or on the self-care wheel, some of those different activities, but for at least 3 or 4 of each of the categories that are listed here, I want you to come up with 1 to 2 things that you can take care of yourself in each of those categories. And knowing that some of those things may not necessarily always be like fun and woo-woo, but things that would definitely contribute to your wellness. Okay. So 4 categories, 2 to 3 things in each of those categories, and more if you can think of it. Got another 15 seconds left here. All right. Okay. Now we're going to talk a little bit about stressors. I purposely like to use the term stressor instead of trigger, because triggers are a term that I think are being oversaturated and improperly used. So I think trying to adjust language and saying stressor as something that is stressing you out, is causing you distress, is a little bit more succinct language. And it's important that we use the words that resonate with folks and that folks can understand. So when we talk about stressors, these are things that can happen that can evoke a specific response. Okay. And that response can be an emotion. The response can look like a thought loop, or what some people may feel is like thought spirals. It can evoke a particular behavior or a physical body response. Okay. Stressors, there are certain things that you can anticipate. And I used this example with one of my clients earlier today. Like you can anticipate when you go and have to give a really big presentation, or if you have to give a presentation for school or for work, that's something that gives you anxiety. That's something that you can anticipate that's happening that's going to cause you some distress. And then there's also when life be lifing. As long as we are alive and our heart is beating, life is going to life. And there are things that are going to happen that you can't anticipate. So regardless of if you can anticipate or you can't anticipate what is going to happen, you may not be able to control what happened or what has happened to you in the past or what's going to happen to you in the future, but you can work to manage how you would like to respond. Okay. And whatever your response is to the situation, it's really, really important to know that your response is normal. However you respond to a situation is a normal response if that's the response that you're having. And I think it's really important to validate ourselves when we're having these responses and being like, I'm bugging. It's like, oh no, like this is how our spirit, this is how our heart, this is how our brains are interpreting this. So this response is normal, but how can I get from responding in this way to responding in a way that feels good and feels in line with how I actually want to respond from this grounded space now? Okay. So I'm going to ask everybody here to take a deep breath with me, okay? I'm going to put another 2 minutes on the clock. And I'm going to ask you to think of what are some of the things that are likely to trigger a chain reaction of unhelpful thoughts, feelings, or behaviors. And I want you to just try and spend at least like the first minute on that. And the second minute, what are some of the things that you can do to cope with the stressors that make you uncomfortable or upset? And how can you prep yourself if you anticipate these things? And how can you recover after they've happened? So I'm put another 2 minutes up on the clock. Here we go. About a minute left. Okay. Okay. So next we're gonna think about when things start to break down. Because it's gonna happen. Because life be lifing. And that's okay, all right? So sometimes for some folks, it's helpful to think from warning sign to crisis. For other folks, it might be helpful to start at crisis and actually work backwards. So when I do not feel safe or when I do not feel well at all, what does that look like? And then from there, what are some of the things that happen that lead up to that? And that's the process that I recommend for folks. Like if you're having a really hard time recognizing what those warning signs are, or you feel like sometimes poof out of nowhere it just happens, which for some people it definitely does in terms of mental health. Sometimes like there isn't anything necessarily avoidable that you can do, but if there are other things that you can do preventatively for your mental health, thinking about what are some of those things that you do or don't do. So early warning signs, what are some of those early signs and symptoms that happen before a full-blown crisis? One of those things for me is I know when I stop eating or when I allow myself to be so consumed with everything that's going on that I forget to eat or I neglect to eat, that is a very early warning sign for me that I am heading down a trajectory that is not going to be well for my mental health. Another early warning sign for me is when I start to forget stuff, or when I start to put myself in spaces where I'm overbooking, or I'm double booking, or I'm saying I'm going to do two things at the same time that I definitely cannot do. Or when I stop putting things in my calendar or writing things down, like those are my systems that I have. When I stop doing those things, that's an early warning sign for me that I can be heading towards a path. And what's really nice about understanding your own personal early warning signs is if you can learn what those are and recognize them, you can catch things, or you can start to course correct before you get to a space of crisis. Again, sometimes crisis is unavoidable, but these are some of the things that you can do in terms of that level of prevention. I talked a little bit about bad day bare minimums, but when things are pretty bad, and I like to say bad days are right before crisis, right? Where things aren't pretty, we're not really doing we're just not. We're still existing, but like definitely not at optimal or capacity or at what we would feel is comfortable as our personal baseline. But when things are getting bad, what are those 2 to 3 things that you need at a bare minimum? And are there alternatives? I think it's really important to think about that. So, really bad days for me really can sometimes look like, I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to move. I physically feel like I do not have the energy to do any of those things, right? So for me, on those bad days, at a bare minimum, I tell myself that I have to eat, and that I have to eat. I just wrote this down early today. And that I have to at least like bathe or shower or something of that nature. Those are the 2 things that I have to do all day. And I have from the time that I wake up to the time that I go back to sleep to try and do those 2 things done. Sometimes when I get in those spaces, eating a meal physically makes me feel repulsed. And so food looks nasty, it smells gross. It's not something that I want to do. And so the alternative that I have dubbed is that I'll either drink like a smoothie, or I'll drink a juice, something that has protein in it that'll help give my body some energy, and will give my body some nutrients. So that's my alternative. Or like sometimes I'll just eat a handful of cereal. Let's call it real. Like sometimes like that's literally just what you have capacity for, and that's okay. And then ideally on those bad days, I would love if I could take like a shower or a bath. And if that feels inaccessible, I usually like to say wash your important parts. So your face, your underarms, and your groin, like just hitting those hot spots with a washcloth. And if that feels really inaccessible, splashing water on your face, kind of like what MJ was saying, just being able to get that sense of refreshness. Okay. So thinking about those things for yourself, what are 2 to 3 things, period, that you would like to get done? And are there alternatives that you can think of that are accessible for yourself if you're having a really tough time? And then crisis planning. So when you do not feel like you can be safe, who can you call and where can you go for additional support? Who you going to call? So whether that be a support, whether that be a mental health professional, whether that be a crisis line, whether that be your local mobile crisis, who can you reach out to and where can you go? Whether that be to a therapist's office, whether that be to the hospital, if that's where you really need to be at that time. And we're going to talk a little bit more about crisis planning in the next slide. But do you have any questions about early warning signs or bad day bare minimums? Any thoughts or reflections on this slide in particular? Okay. All right. So boom. This is the outline that I recommend using for developing a crisis plan. What's really important to remember is that only you can define what crisis looks like for you. What crisis may look like and feel like for you can and probably will look extraordinarily different from what crisis looks like for another person. It's important that you understand what it looks like for you, A, to not invalidate where you're at, and B, to make sure that you are getting the help and the support that you need before you get to a space where you are severely unwell. Okay. So some of these questions on this slide may not apply, or some of these prompts may not apply, but think about for you, when shit has hit the fan, when it's bad, when you are like, what the hell? When you are like, I can't do it, I can't stand it, I don't got it to give. What does that look like for you? Okay. I'm going to put 2 minutes on the clock and you're going to answer, or at least think through some of these prompts. But what are some of the behaviors that may endanger you or others? So what are some of the ways in which you may feel unsafe, or the ways in the past that you have been unsafe? And the answer might be nothing, and that's okay too. When I'm in crisis, I want the support of blank. It's really important to know the people around you and know who can support you in that space and who will be beneficial to have around you when you're in that space and who is not. Which is why the next prompt is, when I'm in crisis, the following people should not have access to me. And I think it's really important to name those people, because we may have people in our lives that are very well-intentioned, that care about us a lot, or that want the best for us, but when we're there, the things that they say or the way that they act or the things that they're doing just aren't helpful. Okay. Then we can start to think about, these are the things that I can do to help get back to feeling well. So what are some of those things that you can do to help get yourself back on track, to course correct? When I'm in crisis, these things make me feel much worse. These can look like self-sabotaging behaviors. These can look like things that may exacerbate other symptoms. So for some folks, when you're already in a space of feeling unwell, or what I can say is for me, when I'm already in a space of feeling unwell, using substances, smoking, doing all this other stuff, it just isn't a good mix for me, right? That may be different for you, right? So, and then lastly, what are signs to yourself and others so that others will know that things are actually on the mend, or things are getting better, or we're coming out of a space of crisis? I think it's important to note what does that shift start to look like and feel like, because we need to have signifiers for when we're coming out of a space of crisis, so that way we can shift and start to focus on other things. Okay. So I'm gonna put another 2 minutes on the clock, and I want you to think through or write through some of these things. If you had some ideas kind of pop in your head, write some of those things down for your personal crisis plan. Got about a minute left. All right. So once we get out of crisis, it's important to move towards recovery, right? So this is the plan that you would use when you're no longer actively in crisis. This is where we pick up the pieces and we work on how do we move forward. So this is two different parts. I have two different sets of questions. I'm going to read through these questions. I'll give you 2 minutes. Again, you can spend about a minute on each of these, or if anything resonates with you as I'm reading through it, you can jot it down. So for post-crisis planning, what does it look like when I'm fully out of that space of crisis? Not saying that you are back at baseline, but you're not in crisis any longer. How would I like to feel when I'm fully recovered, right? What would I like to feel like when I get back to a space of being at my baseline? Were there any choices that I made that contributed to the crisis? And the answer here may be no, right? Thinking about at this point in time, was there anything that I could do differently? Was there anything that I learned through this crisis? Are there any changes that I need to make to my life as a result of being in this space of crisis? And is there anything that you can do to prevent this from happening in the future? And again, when you're in that space of recovery, some of the answers to these questions may be no. There is nothing that I can do. This was something that felt like it just happened. But sometimes there may be very distinct things like, oh, I really should avoid this person, or this situation or this type of environment really triggers me, and maybe I shouldn't be around that any longer. Maybe should I work to remove myself from there. Okay. Then we have our space of integration. So once we're out of that space of crisis and we're kind of in that post-crisis planning space, we can talk about reintegration or coming back into the world or coming back into ourselves. What are the things that would help ease my transition post-crisis? What are the things that others can do for me or others can help me with? I feel like oftentimes when we get into these spaces where things feel really tough, people ask, what can I do? How can I help? I want to love on you. And when we're in those spaces, our brain is just like, I don't know. You're like, things are bad, but I don't know what to do or how to help in that regard. So sometimes thinking through those things preemptively can be really helpful. Again, one of those things for me is eating and making sure that I have really good, nutritious food. And so one of the things that I ask others to do is like, can you make me a meal, or can you order me something, or can you pick up a salad, or like those are some of those things that I can do that'll help me accomplish or take care of some of those things that would really be helpful for me to feel better. And that's a way that someone can pour into me. What are the things that can or cannot wait? Things that can wait, maybe responding to emails or texts or communications. Some things that can't wait might be like paying rent or things of that nature. So really making sure that you work to prioritize what is urgent and what is important, and putting things that are not urgent or not important kind of on the back burner. What are the things that I can do for myself every day? What are the things that I can do for me? What are the things that I may need others to do for me while I'm in this space? And how will or is that for a specific timeline? Is that until I really can feel better and take on that for myself? Really kind of trying to think through that. Are there any people, situations, or things that you need to avoid for now because it could put you back into a space of crisis? And are there people that you would like to thank for showing up for you or for being there? Or are there people that you need to make amends with? Sometimes when we're in spaces of crisis, we're not our best selves. We can just be honest and truthful. And that can look like lashing out, or that can look like various behaviors or interactions with the people that are closest to us, because they might feel the safest to kind of play out those things with. But is there anything that I need to do, or any conversations that I need to have with people in that regard? And conversely, one I didn't write on here, again, is there anybody that needs to go? Because they weren't helpful, or have I learned that, oh, I care about this person, I want them in my life, but I can't have them around when I'm going through this because they've shown me that they can't show up for me in that way in which I need. Okay. So here's some things to think about in recovery. There are some things that you can preemptively think about, and there are some things that you really can only process when you're in that space. Okay. So lastly, some reminders that I think is really, really important. And I'm actually going to start from the right and go left. There is a way out of darkness, even if you can't see it yet. I'm going to say it again. There is a way out of the darkness, even if you can't see it yet. Okay? It is really easy to get lost, to feel confused, to feel consumed by the emotions and the thoughts. It happens. It happens to all of us. But there is a way to get to the other side. And I like to remind people, as long as there is still breath in your body, you ain't done. You ain't done yet. Okay? In the middle, it's important to remember that there are people willing to love you and support you if you let them. And sometimes you may not want them, but knowing that there are people that are there, and even if you don't feel like you have those people directly in your life, there are professionals that are paid to be there, right? So people can come in and support you as much as you want or let them. And even in that space of tenderness and vulnerability, you really get to control what that looks like. And lastly, this process takes practice and refinement. It is important to remember that practice makes practice. Practice makes practice, right? The goal of the goal of life, we're just being honest, the goal of being here on this earth is to gather data and figure out, how do we move forward? How do we move closer in alignment with who we desire to be and who we authentically are? Okay. So thank you. Yay. I learned that there are like shortcuts on here now, and I'm like, oh man, we're gonna confetti, confetti, confetti. Oh, just love it here. So any questions, any comments, any concerns, any queries, any qualms or conundrums or testimonials, anything that you want to share, anything that was particularly resonant. I also wanted to leave the donation links back up there because I didn't drop them in the chat earlier. But yeah, any thoughts, anything anyone else wanted to share before we close out?
This was great.
Thanks, MJ. Let me stop sharing my screen so I can see all of your wonderful faces.
I think in talking, I realized that I have done more than I thought, like for a toolkit. Like I was thinking about like signs for me is like having trouble like eating or remembering to eat or eating like big meals. And like in the last month, since I've been living on my own, I went shopping. I'm okay, let me actually get snacks, like snacks that will make me like feel good and I can eat, because I realized that I'm more of a snacker. And so I've been eating more consistently because it's not like these big, overwhelming meals. And I can grab like a granola bar or a cookie or like a piece of pound cake or yogurt,